समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
India, as we know, is significantly, quite significantly, and chronically a trade deficit country in the sense that our exports are less than our imports. You can put it the other way around. Our imports are way more than our exports. Now, when we look at our imports, two things in fact distort the picture. One of those things is something that we all know, that is crude oil. India imports a lot of crude oil. In any given year, it'll be in the ballpark of 130 billion dollars. Sometimes it's gone up also. 2022-23 it had gone up to 157.5 billion dollars. Then it came down because of the fall in global crude oil prices and also because of the slightly cheaper oil becoming available from Russia. So that is our chronic problem that we can do nothing about because we are not finding any more crude oil. In fact, on the other hand, the oil that we had so far, particularly our Bombay high oil, for example, those gas fields are now drying out, so in Assam. So that is one issue. What is the second item? The second item also is oil, and that is what we're talking about today. That is edible oil. So every tadka that you put in your dal, on your sabzi, everything you put in your kadhai to fry anything, irrespective of which part of India you live in and what kind of food you eat. Even if you eat Western food, Chinese food, Oriental food, whatever, you need oil in your food. You put it in your frying pan, you put it in your kadhai, you can maybe just brush your meat or fish or vegetables with it, but you need oil to cook. That oil, which is an essential commodity, every human being needs oil as part of their food. That oil India is also greatly deficient of. It's not just crude oil as in petroleum, it's also edible oils. Now, the issue is that crude oil, you need to find oil, right? Our minister has talked about, Hardeep Puri has talked about finding many Guyana-sized oil prospects of the Andaman Islands. When that happens, we'll see. These things take a lot of time. Until then, we import 88% of our crude oil. It sounds cruel, but the fact is that India also imports 58% of its edible oil. So 88% of oil that goes into fuels and energy, 58% of the oil that actually fuels our bodies, because besides carbohydrates, oil is the main source of energy in our bodies. 58% of that is imported. What is the issue right now? Why are we talking about this? We are talking about this because at this moment, this has become a deeply significant issue politically, diplomatically, believe it or not, but also it also serves as a point of reminder when we tell ourselves again, and I'm also able to once again evangelize an idea to you that we have to embrace modern technologies. We embrace modern technologies in every area. If we did not, I will not be using this iPhone. You will not be getting this recording in no time and watching it on YouTube, right? Or on our social media handles. That all comes from embracing technology. But the area in which we've been frightfully, disastrously, and I will give you some data as we go along, disastrously and self-destructively shy of absorbing technology or embracing technology is biotechnology. Biotechnology, new seeds, which are sometimes described as, I'm taking my time coming to this because this expression, genetically modified organisms, GMO, has been given such a bad name in propaganda. It's been given such a bad name in propaganda when literally trillions, maybe about 5 to 6 trillions or more meals which are composed of GM products, GM commodities have been consumed with not one negative effect. And I will give you a list of countries as we go along that have now adopted it. Why is it significant now? For two reasons. One, the gap between India's oilseed needs or edible oil needs, because out of oil seeds you take out edible oil, and India's production is now rising. The gap is rising. Say if you go back to 2010, between 2010 and now, if you make a straight comparison between 2010 and now, we have seen our oilseed production grow by 3.55% per year. So you start in 2010, 11.62 million tons. 2023-24, it came to 15.96 million tons. That's a growth CAGR of 3.55%. Whereas our need for edible oil has also gone up by almost 3.5 to 4%. And it will go up by a steeper rate as we go up the value chain, as we become less poor, and more of our people in this vast country can afford oil because oil is expensive. So people scrounge on oil. When people are poor, they want to fill their belly with rice and wheat. When that is done, they want sugar, then they want oil, then they want proteins, milk, egg, chicken, meat, fish, pulses, most importantly. All of that comes in. That is as you go up the value chain and the incomes go up. So the demand for oil seeds will grow much faster. You're already starting by producing only 42% of what you need, importing 58%. And this gap will keep on increasing because your demand will increase by say 4% of your 58% requirement. Your production will increase by about 3.5% of your 42% production. So you can see this gap will keep on increasing, and I am sharing this graphic with you. This is from the NITI Aayog report of July 31, 2024, which tells you, and it's a very telling graphic. See, it's a bit of a scissors graphic, because where it starts in 1986-87, you can see that India is only about 20% import dependent. India's import dependence is only 20%. But as time passes, India's consumption goes up because India's poverty is coming down. As people become less poor, once again, as they go up the food value chain, they want to use more oil. At some point of time, the graphic intersects. And what is the graphic? One, what remains generally a little bit flat is India's production, but the graphic that's moving is India's percentage dependence. So what was only 30% or so dependence in 86-87 has now come to more than 50%. At this point, 58%. This is a graphic that has data up to 2021-22. You will find it in the NITI Aayog paper of 2024. From there, we are taking this graphic and some others also to explain the point to you. Now, I have now told you the problem. This is one problem. There is a second problem. That's the reason I said this is also diplomatic and in some ways also strategic. It's diplomatic with grand strategic implications. India is right now caught in this very complex trade negotiation with the US. Donald Trump doesn't like the fact that his country has a large trade deficit with India. The US has a trade deficit with most countries, right? But with India also he has a sizable trade deficit, not a fraction of what it has with China, but still a sizable trade deficit. He wants to plug it. How does he plug it? India can help plug it by buying more from the US. What does India buy from the US? Whether India buys the F-35 or not, that is something that will happen in the course of time. There are many other considerations involved in issues like that. But there are some simpler options. For example, America is one of the world's largest producers of surplus soybean. Agriculture is a political issue. In America as well as in India, in all democracies in particular, agriculture is a political issue. Only about 1% of Americans are involved in agriculture. But that 1% is Donald Trump's the stoutest, the noisiest, and the most important base for him. American soybeans so far was mostly being bought by the Chinese. The Chinese consume a lot of soybean, and it's not just because they want to make tofu from this, although tofu, because soybean goes into human food chain there, particularly through tofu in the Eastern nations, Eastern cultures, that's an important thing. But the other important thing in China is that in China, pork is a very popular meat. So almost exactly 50% of all of the world's pigs are being reared in China. Pigs need to eat, and all animals, all cattle need to eat food that gives them, like human beings, that gives them carbohydrates, energy, and also protein. So the pigs, as well as livestock elsewhere, usually these days consume, besides whatever else, straw, etc. they might get, they consume what is called as meal. And this meal consists of several things. In this meal, the maize, the leftover from maize, after you've made ethanol from it, the leftover product of maize goes into this meal also for our poultry. That gives our birds and our animals their energy, their calories. Whereas in most countries, the soybean meal, that's after you've taken oil out of soybean and you're left with what I might describe as husk, that goes into cattle feed and also bird meal, poultry meal. That gives your animals and your birds the protein. So the Chinese need this enormous amount of soybean for their poultry and their pig farmers as well. The Chinese have weaponized soybean now, soybean and corn, because the Chinese are such big buyers and consumers. So the Chinese are telling the Americans, you are giving us trouble over tariffs and things. We will not buy soybean from you. We don't depend on you. We will go and buy from Argentina, Brazil. They are also big, huge producers of soybean and corn. We'll buy from Canada. Canada is a big producer of corn, for example. As China is diversifying its source of imports, particularly of soybean, the Americans are worried. Trump is worried because that affects his base. So Trump wants to cover for some of that by getting India to buy his soybeans. India should be an easy thing. India should buy soybeans because India is short of soybean oil. I told you, India imports 58% of its edible oil need. Now, of India's imports of nearly 18 to 20 billion dollars worth. In fact, 2 years back, India's imports of edible oils had gone above 20 billion dollars. Now it's about last year it might be about $16 billion or so. I'm giving you approximate figures, but that's not because our oil import has come down. That's mainly because global edible oil prices have come down. Those fluctuate as well, just as crude prices fluctuate. Of the oil that we import, edible oil, the bulk of it is palm oil. Palm oil we import from Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, right? Thailand, we have been trying to grow some in India. This government came up with a palm oil promotion policy. It has moved a little bit. So India's palm oil production, I noticed, has doubled in the past 4 or 5 years from about 1.5 million tons to about 3 million tons. It is still a very small percentage of what India needs, but there is an improvement that should be acknowledged. But this gap will remain. And I will soon quote from another NITI Aayog paper to tell you how is this gap expected to proceed by 2030, 2036, 2047. That's a Viksit Bharat year. So why doesn't India just go and buy these soybeans from the US? Of the edible oil that India imports, 4.11 billion worth in the last year for which we have data, but you can say generally $4 billion worth is just soybean oil. India is buying it from Argentina, India is buying it from Brazil, India is buying some of it from Russia, from wherever India can get it. Why can't India buy all of it from America? Now the problem with the Americans is that Americans produce the soybean seed but they don't have solvent extraction plants because they don't need so much oil. So why should American farmers and American manufacturers set up plants there to make edible oil, to convert this soybean into edible oil? That takes too much time, it's an effort, it's investment. When the Chinese just buy it lock, stock and barrel, buy the shipload and convert it into oil, tofu and animal feed. So the Chinese have been just doing it on a turnkey basis for the Americans. Americans are now looking for an alternative. They are looking for alternative markets. So why is India not buying it? Which brings us to the point of the day. India is not buying it. India is so scared of buying it. In fact, I wanted to use the expression, I hyphenate scared with another 4-letter word which begins with S and ends with T, right? I will not tell you the full word, you can guess. India is so scared that NITI Aayog produced a paper just last month, NITI Aayog produced a paper which said these are the solutions whereby you can reduce the trade deficit between yourself and the Americans. That's what Trump wants. So you can bridge the trade gap with the US. Second, you can negate reciprocal tariffs from Trump. And number 3, you can open window for further exports. What was NITI Aayog's formula? I will tell you about NITI Aayog's formula, but let me tell you the highlight. The highlight is that NITI Aayog has just withdrawn that paper without telling anybody anything. They've withdrawn that paper. That paper has disappeared from internet. You have to go into deep search to find it. My colleagues have found it. I will share the paper with you also. In fact, some pages will run as I talk. One oilseed report was a larger report of last year, 31st July 2024. That report we have, that is still on the NITI Aayog website. That's a 214-page report. This one made the case to allow imports of soybean oil from America in a particular way. Now, if you're just importing soybean oil, you are importing from Argentina, Brazil, etc., etc., etc. Why can't you import from America? I told you because Americans have not set up solvent extraction plants, the oil extraction plants, to convert this into oil. And even if they convert this into oil, what will they do with what is left behind? Because they will not convert this into meal and sell to whom, right? They have to sell it to somebody. The problem is that in America, almost the entire soybean production is based on GMO seeds. Americans have been rapidly approving GMO seeds in almost every large crop. And they've done it for years and years and years now. In fact, the first country to approve GMO soybean seeds was the very quote-unquote left of center ANC-run South Africa in 1997. Nobody has grown horns in any country in the world that's been consuming soybean from there, or that's been consuming meat from animals who've eaten meal based on this GM soybean. But in India, there is phobia about GMO. There's a phobia on the left and there's phobia on the right. So as NITI Aayog came up with this paper suggesting this solution, immediately they were visited by Luddites of the left and of the right and the Kisan organizations. When I say the right, these are also the sister organizations of the RSS. They all came. That's the reason I said NITI Aayog also, with good intentions, they put out the solution in public, and I will tell you what the solution was, and you will then laugh at the stupidity of our campaigners and our activists in having blocked it. They were so S.T scared that they just withdrew this paper. They withdrew this paper. That's the reason I call it a non-paper. I know diplomats call something else a non-paper, but this is a non-paper because it came in and it disappeared. What was the solution? The solution was, all right, the Americans will not make oil for you. They will not convert this into oil for you. But what you can do is you can import the seed. You can import the seed. It comes by ship to an Indian port. Next to the port, close to the port, you have Indian companies. India has enough companies now in the foods and oil business. Even Adani, for example, they had Wilmar, right? So any of these companies has the wherewithal to set up large solvent extraction plants close to your ports. Close to your ports, you import this seed from the US, you extract the oil. There is no problem with the oil because no proteins go in the oil. And any GMO, if at all such a thing exists, a GMO element going into food, that cannot come into oil because that will only travel with protein. And oil, as we know, has no protein. So you extract the oil, and what remains then, you can export back. You can export it back as meal, maybe some of it to the Americans and to others, because there is a global demand for soybean meal as cattle feed. So if you are paranoid that you will not let even soybean meal go into your food chain, which means go into your own meal that your buffaloes and cows and goats and pigs and your poultry eats, all right, darna hai to daro. Don't consume it, right? Let your poultry farmers, your dairy farmers, let them complain and fight. One day this will change when they come out on the street and protest. And I think it's a matter of time when they will, because they are facing such scarcity of meal now and prices are going up. But you export this, just keep the oil. That will please everybody, and that will also open a route to export. That's the third point in the Niti Aayog paper, that you can export the meal. Where is the problem then? The problem is these will be GM seeds. So hello, every gram of oil, $4 billion, $4.1, $4.2 billion of soybean oil that you import from Argentina, Brazil mostly, some from the US, every gram of this is extracted from GMO seeds, right? This is such a nonsensical idea that you will keep on buying the oil from there, but you will not even have the seed come into the coastal areas of your country in a bonded situation where it's converted straight into oil. Oil comes into your country and the husk or the meal goes out of the country. That is the level of paranoia that we have. And that's the reason Niti Aayog has withdrawn this paper, or that this Niti Aayog paper has become a non-paper, right? Nobody is supposed to have seen it. Nobody is supposed to talk about this. This was too hot for them. They burnt their fingers with it. Why? Because garv se kaho, hum stupid hai, right? We are a stupid nation. And I will give you some more data to make the point that I'm not talking just like that. I'm giving you facts which are global, international, and which are substantive. So one bargaining point that India had with the Trump administration right now is shaky. Will Prime Minister Modi himself intervene in this? Because on this might rest the prospects of a trade deal with America, at least an early deal happening or not happening. And if it does not happen, we know the consequences will not just be 26% tariffs, which will be really hurtful to a lot of Indian industry, will drive a lot of people out of their jobs, because India has a large merchandise export to America besides services. Services are not affected. Services are not subject to tariffs because with services, nothing crosses a border. So only merchandise is affected. So lots and lots, literally lakhs of jobs will be lost. But you see, even now, I saw today financial papers, they all had this big story saying India and US are close to a deal may happen. But there was a story on the side saying some related organizations say there will be no concession on GM, biotechnology, etc., etc. So all of that comes from Luddite paranoia. Before I give you some data and facts on modern agriculture, modern seeds, let me also share some graphics with you. And these are graphics from the 214-page Niti Aayog paper. So thank you very much, Niti Aayog. First graphic tells you the global acreage under oilseeds and yields. The line that's going steeply up is the yields. So see globally how yields are increasing. It's now 14 tons per hectare. Having said that, I will give you one factoid on just soybean. Just soybean. Indian farmers' yield per hectare for soybean is just just over 1 ton per hectare, just over 1 ton. In America, it's more than 4 tons per hectare. In Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, these are countries with huge land masses and humongous amounts of arable land. The yield even in these countries, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, is about 3 to 3.5 tons per hectare. So the farmer in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico and America is getting about 3.5 to 4.5 times more per hectare of soybean than their Indian counterpart. One of the main reasons for that is that Indian counterpart is still condemned to using the old seed because, why? Because both our intellectual elites, campaigning elites on the left as well as the right are paranoid about, scared of GMO. While at the same time, all of us are eating samosas, vadas, dosas, hamburgers, whatever we eat, everything fried, mostly in soybean oil that is imported from GMO seeds, all of it from GMO seeds. You want to see how stupid we can be? Look at your cotton oil. In fact, in Gujarat now, cotton oil is the most consumed oil, even more consumed than groundnut oil, because groundnuts are now more lucrative for farmers to sell as nuts. They've also become the poor persons or the lower middle classes dry fruits, right? Everybody who drinks would usually have peanuts, if not cashews or almonds and stuff like that. Those are very expensive. So eaten peanuts are now getting more value. They're also getting more export value. In any case, cotton seed oil. Why are we talking about cotton seed oil? Almost 100% of India's cotton cultivation now is BT. The only GMO or BT seed that India allows, the GMO seeds that India allows, is cotton. On the grounds that, all right, this is at least not food. That also, thank God, it was God's own blessing that Vajpayee government had the foresight and they allowed GM cotton in India, which more than doubled India's cotton yields, and they went up and up. And then other activists came in because they wanted to replicate the same seed in India. That process has stopped, so India's cotton yields are now falling, but that's a story for another day. The fact is that it is a little seed in every flower of cotton, that little seed that you take out. That cotton seed is what is used then to make cotton oil. So all of us are using that oil in our food chain. It is made from cotton seed from which this oil has been taken. But this is only oil. As you said earlier, Shekhar Gupta, in oil there is no protein, so there is no GMO. So stay with me. Where does that meal from that cotton seed go? That cotton seed, since times immemorial, right? I don't know what it's called in the part of the country where you live, but in the part of country where I live, it's called binola, right? If you go to any commodities website, you will find binola there, BINOLA or BINAULA or cotton seed. You take out the oil, the rest goes into your cattle feed, right? So every drop of milk you are drinking, every bit of ghee you put on your roti or in which you fry your bene dosa, that has a lot of ghee, isn't it? Every piece of paneer, all your paneer tikka, all your matar paneer, lassi, chach, everything that comes out of milk in India has come from cattle who've been fed on meal that contains elements of this cotton seed. Once again, how obstinate and how unimaginative and how unrealistic can you be? That's one of the reasons I use that expression stupid, our opposition to this. But that is not the only reason. I will share a couple more graphics with you and then tell you some striking data. See this graphic. This tells you global production of how the global oilseed production is going up, and then we'll give you a separate graphic on how Indian production has gone up. And again, see the gap between global production and Indian production. It's not as if globally acreage is going up so much under oilseeds. It's just that the yields are going up because seeds have become better. Whereas we have indulged in this awful self-denial in our country. Then the next graphic, this has 3 lines. 3 lines, the green line is total consumption in India. The blue, as you would expect, it's the country that Team India also uses. Blue is the production in India. That's the line at the bottom. And in between, the red is the import. So you can see our production is going up a little bit. Imports are going up also fair bit, and the gap between the two may be widening. It is not reducing. That's an important point. And then you can see the overall consumption, and the gap between overall consumption and production is filled with imports. So you can see what the problem is. Now the NITI Aayog paper of 2024, which fortunately has not been withdrawn, which set out the problem on oil seeds. It set out the problem on oil seeds and edible oils, on the gap and what could be done to address this. That estimated, so 2021-22, India's oil production, edible oil production was 13.3 million tons. 2030, they estimated to be 16 billion tons. 2047, the Viksit Bharat year, 26.7. Then they've taken several scenarios to assess how much the gap will be going ahead. Now, one of them is really an ideal world, not just a Viksit Bharat, but really a Sannyasi Bharat scenario that says India really starts consuming less and less oil. What the doctor suggests, that means nobody has pakoda, samosa. You have to ban pakoda, samosa, vada, dosa, gulab jamun, everything. So the same minister who's now setting temperature limits on your air conditioners, he will also then impose the ban on all these foods that we eat. Plus, you will be allowed to have only half a chammach of tadka, half a spoon of tadka in your dal, etc. That's a joke. It's not going to happen. So unless you follow that pattern of consumption, and suddenly India becomes so sannyasi, all of us become a country of sannyasis who just live on no oil or almost no oil, our gap will continue increasing. So if you follow the European level or the developed country level, let me not say Europe, developed country level consumption, our consumption goes like that, then the gap, which is today about 16 million tons, will go up to 22.3 million tons. By 2047, it will be 15.2 million tons. And this is the developed country average is about 25.3 kilos of edible oil per year, not per month, per year. So just about 2 kilos of edible oil per person per year. But if you go to the American level, right, we Indians eat a lot of fried food. Everything in India is fried. If you go to the American level, that is 40.3 kg per person per year. Then our gap in 2030 will be nearly 30 million tons, 29.5 million tons. And in 2047, it will be upwards of 40 million tons. That will be a disaster. Now, how to address this? I will tell you what other countries have done and what we are so scared of doing. And this is just a listing of countries, big countries that allow GM seeds, and that have allowed this for years, in some cases for decades. In America, corn, soybean, canola. We import a lot of canola oil from the US and from the US and Canada. It's all extracted from GM seeds. Corn, soybean, canola, sugar beet, alfalfa, papaya, squash. Squash is basically a generic name for kaddu family or turai family or lauki family. Squash, potato, apple, plus. If I go on, it'll take me 2 minutes just listing the crops on which Americans allow GM technology, and that's a country run by the law of torts, right? If something had gone wrong, there'd be class action suits, and companies that make these seeds will be bankrupted in no time. In Brazil, again, a large agricultural power, corn, soybean, cotton. Almost all of this is now GM. In fact, across 61.2 million hectares. All over the world, almost 200 million hectares. I would suggest, and I will explain why, more than 200 million hectares is under GMO seed plantation. The reason I said it's probably more is because the Chinese opened up GM seeds just about 3 years back. And it is now growing in China, and data from China does not come out so quickly. So the data that's currently available from China would say about 7 million to 8 million hectares is under GMO seeds. But I would suspect that because there is a gap of data, there is a gap in data coming from China, it might already be 15 to 20 million hectares. India has really got left behind. So Brazil, I told you, Argentina, soybean, corn, cotton, wheat, right? 60% of all arable land in Argentina, and Javier Milei didn't bring it. He inherited it. This happened decade plus back. Almost 60% area is under GMO. All canola in Argentina is under GMO. We are big importers of edible oil from Argentina. That's one thing the Prime Minister will also be discussing now on his visit in Argentina and Brazil. South Africa, I told you earlier, were the first to approve in 1997. 85% corn in South Africa, where its staple is GM. Sugarcane is now under trial and soon looks like it will be approved. Paraguay, Uruguay, again, small countries, but not small amounts of land. Australia, canola, cotton, safflower are all GM. Philippines, corn, golden rice, which addresses the problem of micronutrient malnourishment. Mexico, cotton plus soya, again, big countries. Colombia, corn, cotton, soybean. Vietnam, corn and soybean. Bangladesh, we know about brinjal. Indonesia, sugarcane. Nigeria, arhar, pigeon pea, arhar. Now we are such big importers of pulses that will call for another separate cut the clutter. But Nigeria is now a big producer of arhar ki dal. They've approved GMO seeds for arhar ki dal. At this point, nearly 30 countries with 200 plus million hectares. All of India's arable area, almost equal to all of India's arable area, that's just a little over 200 million hectares. Equivalent of that is under GMO crops in the world. Russia and Japan have not yet approved GMO crops, but they allow the import of GMO foods. We, however, have got ourselves so knotted up in this non-science with no scientific evidence to the contrary at all. To the contrary means contrary to the science that GM seeds are safe, particularly after years of trials. Even after that, looking at where the world has gone, we are so paranoid as to indulge in this great self-denial to continue to import nearly $20 billion worth of edible oil from the rest of the world. Most of that rest of the world is extracting it out of GMO seeds, while at the same time, on the same ideological belief, we are now willing to scupper the prospects of a fairly decent trade deal with America and a stabilization of a very important strategic relationship. Right now, the most important aspect of India's strategic interest is held to ransom by this completely propaganda-driven misconception.